You're listening to Spare a Thought, the podcast where I try to shine a light on the people, ideas, issues, and organisations that are often overlooked or misrepresented in the media. I'm your host, Tom Spare. This month, Spare a Thought celebrated 1,000 downloads. A big thank you to everyone who's listened, shared, and commented on the episodes that I've put out into the world. Beyond friends, family, and some dedicated colleagues, I didn't know if anyone would listen to Spare a Thought. It's heartening to know that the content has chimed with so many people, not just in the UK, but around the world. As a way to celebrate, I wanted to put together a retrospective of the first season to look back at the conversations I've had with the first cohort of guests. When I started the show, I didn't really know what shape Spare a Thought was actually going to take. I knew I wanted to make a podcast. I'd started a separate one in June 2024 with Lily Mott and Sid Kurapati called The Political Dispatch. That combined current affairs and conversation. But this project was going to be a lot more intimate in a way, focused with the aim of raising the profile of guests and the causes they were working towards. I have a personal connection to all my guests in Season 1, and as we go through each episode, I'll provide a bit of background as to the guests themselves and how I got to know them. I've been really lucky in my life to meet lots of thoughtful, interesting people. Doing Spare a Thought was sort of way, selfishly, to have conversations with people I know and respect, to understand a bit more about them and to give them a chance to talk about their work, their passions, the causes they support, which are so often underreported or misrepresented in the media. I hope you enjoy these clips. Links to each episode can be found in the show notes. So let's get into it and listen to clips from Spare a Thought Season 1. In this inaugural episode of Spare a Thought, I chatted to Berwyn Rowlands, director of the Iris Prize, the world's largest LGBTQ+ short film prize. I met Berwyn 8 years ago. My manager at the time asked me to work with him to create a video to promote the work of student support and wellbeing at Cardiff University. I rarely laughed so much at doing a project, particularly a work project. And a lot of that had to do with Berwyn's terrible jokes and humour. A little bit about my good friend. Berwyn grew up on the Welsh island of Anglesey in North Wales. In 1997, aged 31, Berwyn was appointed as the first chief executive of the Media Agency for Wales. In this role, Berwyn led the establishment of Wales's National Film and Sound Archive and secured the cooperation of all 22 local authorities to create the Wales Screen Commission, established in 2002. In 2006, he established the Iris Prize, the world's largest LGBTQ+ short film prize, at £30,000. 9 short films have been produced to date with the Iris Prize, including Burger and Followers, which screened at the Sundance Film Festival. In 2022, Berwyn was awarded the St David's Award for Culture, presented to him by then First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford. In the episode, Berwyn and I discussed first cinema memories, delved into the origins of Iris, considered the challenges faced by the LGBTQ+ community, and chatted about the film festival that takes place every October in Cardiff. So here's Berwyn talking about Iris's origins story.
So for the first year, we launched something called the Iris Prize, which we still have today. It's the world's largest short film prize. The winner gets to make another short film on an LGBTQ+ theme. We wanted Iris to be a prize and an award where creating new content was one of the byproducts. I've always, and I continue to respect film festivals for sharing content. But at that time, so we're talking almost 20 years ago, I remember there were lots of queer, gay, LGBTQ+ stories being made. And sometimes you realize that being passionate about the story was so overwhelming that people forgot that they also needed to be able to tell a story. So we wanted to sort of turn that on its head and basically say, listen, if you're going to persuade a lot of friends and colleagues to invariably work for nothing or support your project, the least you can do is make sure that your film is the best that it can be. So, honing on the script, making sure that you do capture the sound correctly, the lighting, and all of that. Fast forward to 2024, we're in a situation where, I'd like to think that people are able to look at the short list of films competing for the Iris Prize. And because we rely on at least 20 odd international partners for nominating a film from each country or each region, which includes China, North America, mainland Europe, etc. And because of that, the 35 films competing for the Iris Prize, I think most people will agree that they represent excellence in storytelling. And therefore, by its nature, filmmakers will be looking at their work and asking themselves to have an honest conversation, is my film good enough to be there?
In the second episode of Sperafor, I spoke with Dr. Samantha James, an NHS doctor who volunteered for the German charity Sea-Watch, collecting refugees in distress in the Mediterranean in 2022. Many years ago, I worked with a guy called Alex. He stood in a student union election, dressed up as a chicken, and was elected as the Vice President of Postgraduate Students at Cardiff Students' Union. Alex would often reference his girlfriend. She was training to be a doctor, she was smart, funny, and somehow put up with Alex's weird and wonderful humour. Eventually, I got to meet Sam. I could understand Alex's rave reviews: sardonic, intelligent, compassionate, dedicated to her friends, her family, to Alex, and to her work. Alex had mentioned Sam volunteering on the Med. I thought the experience would make for a great story, something a lot of people would want to listen to. So when it came round to making Sperafor, I thought there was no better person to have a conversation with than Sam. In episode 2, Sam and I discussed why she became a doctor, how she found out about Sea-Watch, and then we chatted about her experience in the Mediterranean. Here's Sam talking about her experience on the Med.
We did all of our rescues in a 24-hour period, and we had 7 different rescues. I think the smallest boat that we had was 11 people, and the largest boat was 106. And these boats completely varying what they're made of. So they could be fiberglass, wooden, rubber dinghies, like literally made of plastic. None of them are seaworthy. So the kind of rules is that we don't just rescue any boat that we see. We rescue any boat which looks unseaworthy. If people are in distress, but by definition, all of these boats that the smugglers put them into are not seaworthy. They don't have food, water, shelter, enough petrol to get them to Europe. So they're sort of never going to get there without any help. What was often the case is they had kind of jerry cans full of petrol that they would put in the middle. And the idea would be that somebody or some people would be filling up the engine and driving the boat. But what would often happen actually in the smaller boats, the rubber dinghies, is that the petrol would leak. Petrol and seawater is a really nasty combination. And it's mostly the women and the children that sit in the lower part of the boats. And so they would come on. And our first job when we saw that would be to literally smell them for petrol, because the salt from the sea and the petrol would cause horrendous skin burns. So we just had to shower them off as soon as they came on board, and then wrap their legs in like cling film and try and prevent the burns from being too significant. So yeah, we usually, when we spot a boat, we get an indication of what type of boat it was and roughly the number of people, and then we could appropriately prepare for our triaging of them depending on what we thought we were going to find.
Episode 3 started a mini-series focused on international students studying in the UK. In this episode, I spoke with Julie Campbell, International Student Advisory Manager at Ulster University, about international students and the higher education sector. In 2020, I connected with Julie via a colleague at work. Julie convened online meetups between professionals supporting international students across the UK. In those meetings, we had representations from all parts of the UK. Together we shared our stories, thoughts, worries and ideas as the pandemic turned the university experience on its head. Throughout it all, Julie kept the conversation light, constructive and collaborative. It was great to get to know her. I took so many ideas away with me from those meetings and really appreciated that opportunity to connect with other people across the sector, a rarity in higher education at the time. In this clip, Julie talks about the challenges international students face settling into life in the UK.
So let's say they've got their offer, they've got their visa, they've arrived. Next, it's just that settling in phase, adjusting to life, making friends, finding your people, overcoming homesickness and language barriers, which for a really strong student in their home country can really impact their confidence and their ability to be the best version of themselves when they get here. For many, first time living away from home, perhaps themselves, managing your finances independently, looking after your home away from home independently, accessing our NHS health services, opening bank accounts. It is so very different. And they are challenges that home students don't face to the same degree. For a lot of home students, they will have, parents or, carers that are there to support them and help them get established. And really, they're only either a short flight or a drive or bus journey away. But settling in, we've seen firsthand that this is so crucial and that it can massively impact the well-being of a new student, especially during those first couple of months, just settling in and making those adjustments.
Episode 4 was a continuation of the mini-series focused on international students. In this episode, I interviewed 4 former international students, Sid, Lily, Sumani and Susanna, and 1 current student, Nathan. In my conversations with them, I found out why they chose to study in the UK. We discussed the barriers to living here and how they adapted to living so far away from home. I spent over a decade working in the higher education sector. I found a niche for myself in the arena of welcoming students, particularly international students. And in that time, I met an array of inspiring and thoughtful students who'd come to study in the UK from all over the world. When I started my MA in political communication at Cardiff University, I had the great fortune to meet some great people, some of whom featured in this episode. With Sid and Lily, I co-host the Political Dispatch, as I've mentioned previously. And with those 2 and Susanna and Sumani, I shared loads of classes and conversations. And with Nathan, I helped campaign for the creation of a Vice President International Students at Cardiff Students' Union. And that's something we talked about in the episode as well. I was really chuffed with this episode because it was a real ensemble piece featuring lots of voices and experiences. Here's a clip of Susanna, Sumani and Sid talking about their experiences studying at Welsh universities as international students.
I remember having headaches for 2 weeks with just, my brain speeding up to, progress everything and trying to answer back. So that took me a while, 2 weeks of migraines every single day.
And the biggest challenge again was with the food. It was very difficult. I had to always have hot chocolate with steak bake every morning. That was the only thing I could adjust myself with in the interim, until when I started cooking and getting along with British food, So these were some of the challenges I had.
Probably one of the main things that any international student would face is, you miss home, you miss your country, right? So you got to identify for yourself what are the things that you do on a daily basis that sort of compensate for that. I figured it out pretty soon that there are 3 things that I need, which balance those things out for me. Number 1 is regular conversations with my family. Number 2 is cook more Indian food. Number 3, listen to more songs from India and the subcontinent. If you have these 3, ingredients in a perfect balance, then you should be good.
Episode 5 completed a mini-series focused on international students. In this episode, I interviewed Tanya Thomas, a partner at Spencer West Solicitors, who specialises in higher education disputes and dispute resolution. During my conversation with Tanya, we discussed the issues that students raise when their experience at the university goes awry, the challenging situations international students face, and what steps students can take to resolve their complaint. I first met Tanya whilst we were working together at Cardiff Students' Union. I always enjoyed our conversations at work. Tanya is a force to be reckoned with. She's all about the details, the research, and delivers for her clients. She wins for students in a system that often sets them up for failure. It'd been years since I'd last talked to Tanya, but she was more than happy to talk to me and I'm so glad she agreed to be interviewed. In this clip, Tanya talks about what students should do if something doesn't feel right.
My guiding principles, and what I always say to my clients, like, if your gut instinct, you bother to pick up the phone or email me, your gut instinct is telling you something wasn't right. So let's explore that. And I would really encourage it, and I'm not touting for business at all, but I would encourage you, if you ever are in a situation where something doesn't feel right, that you go and get independent advice, even if that is in your in-house legal service, your friends, your family. Don't take the university's word for it that, no, that's fine, you don't need to do it, or we'll sort it all out. Okay, always check it, because if your gut is telling you something is wrong, it probably is, and it could have life-altering consequences. So if it's a situation that could mean a difference between getting a 2-1 in a first, or having to withdraw from study altogether, or whatever, it matters and it's important. So get a second opinion. If your university is telling you, no, it's fine, we'll sort it out, that will never happen. They will never sort anything out for you. Get a second opinion.
Dima Hamdan is a Palestinian filmmaker and former journalist. In this episode, Dima talks about why she became a filmmaker, her experience of being a member of the Palestinian diaspora, and why she made the Iris Prize-winning film Blood Like Water. Her film tells the story of a Palestinian gay man who is blackmailed to become an informant in occupied Palestine. This conversation with Dima is honest, open, challenging, and thought-provoking. The Palestinian story is filled with tragedy, bloodshed, promises unkept, trauma, and perseverance. After one conversation with Dima at the Iris Film Festival, I knew what a special person she was. Completely and utterly dedicated to her people and the cause of Palestinian liberation. I was so grateful she agreed to be interviewed for the show. In this clip, Dima talks about her film, Blood Like Water.
I felt an urgency to tell the story because there are so many forces in the occupation that are beyond our control. It's difficult to be able to control them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be occupied. But there are some things that we can't control. There are some things where we can make some, as a conservative society, we can make some difficult decisions by depriving gay Palestinian men of the safe space, by telling them this society is not a safe place for you. We're practically handing a present to the Israeli occupation by inviting them to exploit these men. So I wanted to tell the story from the starting point of the society that I come from. I understand that people are conservative if someone is homophobic or against homosexuality, so, doesn't want to go on a witch hunt but doesn't want to deal with it. You can't talk them and convince them otherwise with words. What I'm trying to do is let's find a common ground as a people. If we are devoted to the cause, if we are serious about resisting the Israeli occupation, then what constitutes sacrifice for us? Because some people think, you sacrifice your life, you fight, you resist, you're fighting with arms and you sacrifice your life, and that is the ultimate sacrifice. That is true, but there are other forms of sacrifice. So if you tell a parent, you have to accept your child for who they are and consider that as your sacrifice for the cause, and consider the devastating alternative if you do not accept your kids for who they are. And imagine what it's like if your child didn't feel safe in your own lap as a parent and ended up being a collaborator. The most tragic thing, honestly, is a few months after I shot the film, a confession video did come out of a young Palestinian man who became a collaborator because he was blackmailed with a video of him having sex with another man. He was subsequently executed because he was a collaborator, and because of him, 5 Palestinian men lost their lives. And I remember there was an interesting discussion about this on social media because I was watching the reactions. What was interesting is nobody said anything homophobic. People were focusing on the fact that this young man collaborated. And then there were some people who said, hold on a second, did any of this need to happen? Did he have to lose his life? Did he have to become a criminal and be complicit in the murder of 5 Palestinian young men, all because we did not accept him? Like, are we understanding the devastating impact by not, sacrificing certain things, by saying, okay, we have homosexuality exists in Palestinian society the same way it exists all around the world. We have to find a way to accept it. If we cannot accept it, we have to find a way to deprive the Israeli occupation of using those people against us. And I kind of wonder, because nobody really knows how many people out there have been blackmailed in such a way. But if we can regain control of that, and just imagine for a minute that tool was taken away from the Israeli occupation, there would be a remarkable difference. I believe so. So yeah, that's the message of the film.
Stephen Wheatley is a volunteer crew member for the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, the RNLI, in London. In this episode, I spoke to Stephen about the RNLI's mission, its history, and his experience of volunteering for the 200-year-old charity. I met Stephen during my MA in Political Communication on a module called Emerging Journalism. Me and my classmates were given a mentor each, people from the industry who had had plenty of experience and insight to help us with our final project. I was paired with Stephen. His mentorship guided me through a really tricky spell during my MA. His feedback helped me attain a distinction for my class presentation. I always enjoy talking to him, and he's someone who's made his life his own and who believes wholeheartedly in giving back. In this clip, Stephen talks about what happens when there's a call out at an RNLI station.
Not many people know, but the RNLI provides a life-saving service on the River Thames. Part of the response to the Marchioness disaster you may or may not have ever heard of. There was a tragedy in 1989 where 51 people lost their lives in a collision between 2 boats, the Marchioness and the Bow Bell. Very, very poor visibility, very poor seamanship on behalf of both masters, and unfortunately 51 people died as a result. And as part of that, the government inquiry, the Marine and Coast Guard Agency inquiry, recommended that they provided a Coast Guard on the river to manage any emergency situations, and then also provide some resources for the Coast Guard to use. And they asked the RNLI, and here we are. So 4 stations opened on January the 2nd, 2002. There's one at Gravesend, which is near the sea, which is known as the Deep End. There's Tower Lifeboat, more about in a moment. Then there's Chiswick, which is much further inland, known as the Shallow End. And then there's another boat at Teddington, which runs like a boat does on the coast. The crew have pagers, and they're sitting at their desk or in their office or in their shop or their pub. Pager goes off, and then they go and they launch the boat. Tower Lifeboat, as I say, has been there for 22 years and some months. And we have recently gone through 11,000 jobs, and we'll do more than 700 jobs this year. Because of where it is, it's permanently manned. So we don't carry pagers. We go to the station, as does Greenwich, as does Gravesend, as does Chiswick. So those stations are manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And we're launching as quickly as possible, between 1.5 minutes and 2 minutes from the bell going. And we are dealing with whatever it is that we get to deal with.
Bryony Goffin is a writer, tutor and mentor, and is a specialist in facilitating creative writing experiences in community and healthcare setting. In this episode, I spoke to Bryony about creativity, being creative and facilitating creativity. 9 years ago, I emailed Bryony inquiring about the creative writing workshops she hosted at Chapter Arts Centre in Cardiff. I've been attending her sessions in person and online ever since. Finding community as a writer is really challenging. Writing is so often a solo sport, but every now and then you find spaces that bring together creatives. Bryony is a master at bringing people together and bringing the best out of novice and pro writers alike. During the lockdowns, Bryony's writing prompts and online sessions got me through an incredibly dark time. It was nothing short of life-saving. Here's a clip of Bryony talking about where she finds her creativity.
It's about being alert and present enough to notice when something is snagging my attention. I think I'm not wholly sure, but I think I quoted in my TEDx talk a writer called Anais Nin that people might know from either her erotic journals or indeed her kind of commentary on the creative process, particularly women's creativity. And she says something like, write the significant moment because it will always have roots into the past and branches into the future. So I think if a detail or something snags my attention, makes me kind of wince or makes my kind of heart leap or arrests me in some way, there is a reason why it's caught my attention. If I allow myself to kind of explore and write into that, there will inevitably be narrative there, story there. I think also it's maybe worth mentioning too that it's not just about where we get the ideas, but how we find the courage to express them, because lots of us might have the ideas, but then it's the challenge then about how we channel those onto the page as writers.
And that concludes this special edition of Spare a Thought, a review of Season 1. My thanks to all my guests, Berwyn, Sam, Julie, Sid, Lily, Susanna, Samani, Nathan, Tanya, Dima, Stephen and Bryony. To ensure you are notified of when the next episode is released, make sure you subscribe to Spare a Thought, wherever you get your podcasts from. The title track for this show is Young Shall Grow, credit and thanks to Afro Cluster, Magugu and Asher Jane. The show was researched, written and edited by me, Tom Spare. This has been a Be The Change Media Network production. Thanks for listening.
Whether you like them or not, young shall grow. Better fill them with love. Then them go know. In this life you don't give up. Even when you low, if you fall, get back up. Young shall grow. Whether you like them or not, young shall